Here we go. A record number of people in the U.S. are traveling for the Independence Day holiday weekend, but there are some challenges ranging from staffing shortages at airports to delays caused by the weather and also that smoke from the Canadian fires, all being a big issue. Tony Waterman is at Austin International Airport in Texas with more.
It's the first time since baby Neela was born that the Reshemwalas are traveling. Their destination, California, to visit family and beat the intense Texas heat.
We're going to take these two to Monterey Bay Aquarium and try to do a little bit of sightseeing and then just spend some time with family, which is nice. So it's been the first time in a while since we're heading out, so really excited.
They are just 4 of the nearly 51 million people. The Auto Association, AAA, expects to travel 50 miles or more this July 4th weekend, a record both by plane and by car. High ticket prices, not enough to deter travelers anxious to break free for a little fun.
There's a lot of pent-up demand for travel still from the pandemic. Airports across the country are crazy busy, so we're asking folks to arrive early, to plan ahead, and to pack their patience.
Upwards of 35,000 passengers are expected a day at the Austin airport. And while things have been running smoothly here, there's reason to fear that may not be the case nationwide. In the past week, intense thunderstorms and a shortage of air traffic controllers have led to tens of thousands of flights being delayed or canceled, snarling airports and leaving tens of thousands of travelers stranded and frustrated.
I think airlines should then adjust the number of flights based on the number of staff that they have. We're hearing about the air traffic controllers as well. That's always been a huge issue, so I feel like that's something that needs to be addressed.
Meteorologists expect fewer storms in the coming days, but the chronic shortfall of air traffic controllers who are responsible for rerouting flights during severe weather won't be solved overnight, meaning the problem could stretch well into summer. Another problem that could linger, wildfire smoke from Canada, which is impacting visibility in the north of the country, both for drivers and pilots. And extreme heat here in Texas and across the south could trigger hail and thunderstorms during what is forecast to be the busiest travel season in American history. Traveling this summer, certainly not for the faint of heart. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Austin, Texas.
All right, let's have some fun and what we can expect for this holiday weekend. Michael Taylor, Managing Director, Travel and Retail Analytics firm J.D. Power. Good to see you. You know, I feel like we had a similar conversation not too long ago, but here's my complaint, is that we remain, these airplane prices I hear people complaining about. I hear people complaining about hotels. Last time around, we were getting things fixed. It feels like things aren't fixed in that department, or maybe just there's just too much demand.
Well, there is quite a bit of demand. I think that demand is going to be about 5% more than it was in 2019, which was the previous, pre-pandemic level. So this will be a record level of traffic during holiday periods here in the United States. And yes, you are right. We haven't solved this problem. I think that the airlines are kind of flirting with the edges again of what they can do operationally. How many crews can they put in the air? How many airplanes can be in the air? And what happens if there's weather? I mean, your previous report was spot on. It's rolling weather patterns in the United States that can cause a cascade effect and cause cancellations as far away as the coast of the United States when the storm happens in the middle of the United States. So yes, we are still in a bad spot as far as being able to meet the demand for travel in the United States.
I read something that I have never seen before in my sort of time in watching the sector. United Airlines and JetBlue blamed the FAA for essentially being, for lack of a better word, incompetent. And this is a fairly strong language. What happened here?
Well, there is still somewhat of a shortage of air traffic controllers. It is not nearly matched by the effect that the lack of trained airline pilots has in the system. So this might be something of a convenient excuse for the airlines to blame the FAA for the big problems that they have without having, fewer crews in reserve to meet those special situations when flights are delayed and crews time out and can't fly an aircraft. So there is somewhat a problem with the FAA, but it's not nearly the effect the shortage of airline pilots has on the situation we have today.
Now, if you're a fan of air travel and airlines, Delta gave out some fairly good news saying that the recent surge in demand is essentially here to stay or permanent. And I don't know if your company sees it that way as well, but I got to imagine that's going to be positive for American, JetBlue, United, Alaska, and all the travel-related companies in this space.
Yeah, I think that what we've been able to see in our forecasting at JD Power has been that there has been a prolonged demand for leisure travel, but there's been somewhat of an anemic response as far as business travel goes. But it's been, that gap is made up by the leisure travelers. However, as your previous reporter had reported, prices are putting people off, and something that is too good to last won't. And I think that's probably what's going to happen here is we're probably going to have a good, next few quarters for the airlines. But I think going into next year, people will say, yeah, I fulfilled my travel bug, but it's just too expensive to fly from Washington, D.C. to Orlando this year. And I think that's the risk we run.
I spoke with some diplomats that follow the space to Asia quite carefully, and one of the complaints was that there aren't enough flights from Asia, China to the U.S. and vice versa. Now, while the pandemic is over for both sides, the flights have not come back. What's going on here?
Well, again, that's really the pilot shortage. You have to have pilots in order to fly aircraft, and that is generally the problem we're seeing worldwide. It's mostly acutely here in the United States and North America, but that really is the problem. The planes are there. The planes are already produced. They are, however, sitting idle because no one can fly them at the moment.
The delays and cancellations, a lot has been talked about that as passengers, if your flight or my flight gets delayed by X number of hours or gets canceled completely, that we are entitled to compensation, right? It doesn't matter what country you're from. If you're flying on a U.S. carrier, you have that right. What is the amount of compensation, and how do you go about getting more information on this?
Well, basically, you have to get the airline to admit it was their own scheduling problem or some other kind of problem that was under their control. If it's a weather-related problem or otherwise called an act of God, then they have an out. But the key thing here for travelers is to understand what it is that caused the delay and the cancellation of their flight, and that will affect their level of refunds. So they really have to know, and the airline has to admit it. And sometimes it's very obvious, and they do have to admit it. But of course, they'd like to just ignore it and hope you go away and don't claim anything. So the idea here is you should know, you should know your rights and your contract of carriage with the airlines. And if it is something other than an act of God or a weather delay, then you are probably entitled to some sort of compensation or refund.
Yeah, and please stop bringing so much stuff on the carry-on. It's clogging up all the bins. The flight attendants go crazy, and it just makes it hard for everybody. Michael, good to see you. Have yourself a fantastic 4th of July weekend, my friend.